In our historical archives, the year 2026 is recorded as the era of the Great Blindness. It was a tragic time when humanity clung to its ignorance, perceiving the vast energy ocean that constitutes 95% of reality as nothingness, while trying to build a civilization on the remaining 5% of material dross. I am a system analyst speaking to you from the year 2100. I am here to reanalyze that mysterious man, Isaac Newton, to whom we owe our current interstellar travel networks, instantaneous interplanetary communication, and the limitless energy bursting from the heart of every atom. Your history books portrayed him merely as a cold mathematician who discovered gravity and obsessed over apples. But here, in 2100, we know he was the first child to actually see the ocean. He was not just a rationalist, he was the first ancient soul to perceive the invisible current, the divine software at the heart of the universe. Today, I will explain why Newton remained silent, what he hid, and how we in 2100 turned his lost theories into reality. Let us journey to the damp, dimly lit vaults of Cambridge University, where Newton spent most of his life. There lie thousands of pages of manuscripts that were kept under lock and key for centuries, labeled as embarrassing. Millions of words, alchemical formulas, numerical analyses of sacred texts, and obsessive notes on how a universal spirit permeates all matter. Your ancestors dismissed these notes as the delirium of an aging genius and hid them away. Why? Because the truth Newton discovered was a catastrophe for the political and economic systems of his time, and even yours. If everything is energy, and if this energy, the ether, can be directly commanded, then there would be no need for kingdoms. No need for coal mines, oil wars, or taxed power lines. Newton was not just a scientist, he was the first true visionary of the modern age, filling the massive void that physics, even in your time, dared not address. What you call dark matter today, he called the vegetative spirit. This was not mysticism. It was the first definition of a quantum field. Consider the sterile story taught in your schools. Young Newton sits under a tree, an apple falls on his head, and suddenly he discovers the law of universal gravitation. A clean, controllable story, is it not? But the truth is, Newton hated this story. He felt it oversimplified decades of deep contemplation into a random accident. The reality was far more earth-shattering. Newton knew that gravity was not an attraction but a pressure gradient within the ether ocean. Today, in 2100, when we propel our massive cargo ships through interstellar space using repulsive force, we are using this exact Newtonian principle. He gave the world the equations because mathematics was harmless, but he kept the ocean, the ether itself, to himself. He sensed that humanity was still too primitive and would use such power only to destroy one another. Our 2100 analytical data confirms it. Gravity is actually an external pressure exerted by the vacuum onto matter. Newton had already simulated this in his small laboratory in the 1700s. For Newton, the universe was not a mechanical clockwork of dead stones hurtling through a void. In his vision, the universe was alive, it breathed. Every particle was connected to every other through an invisible neural network, an intelligent and active medium. He called this medium the ether. It was not a passive path for light to travel through. It was the very consciousness of nature. Today, in 2100, by manipulating this medium, we have rendered the speed of light an obsolete barrier. What your ancestors called empty space is, for us, a cosmic data pool carrying trillions of terabytes of data in every cubic centimeter. Newton was seeking how to access this data while trying to change the atomic alignment of metals in his alchemical lab. He was actually learning to manipulate the software of reality. Turning lead into gold was merely a minor side effect. The true goal was to intervene in the fabric of reality itself. Our molecular printers in 2100 operate on this prime matter principle that Newton envisioned in his crucible. Newton spent long nights in the silence of his laboratory, watching the way light interacted with prisms. To you, it looked like a study of optics. To us, looking back from the 22nd century, it was an investigation into the density of the etheric medium. He realized that light was not a projectile, but a ripple in the fabric of existence. Every color, every frequency was a specific vibration of the ether. He wrote in his private journals that if one could master the vibration, one could master the material world. He saw the world as a giant musical instrument where every atom played a note determined by its resonance with the ether. This is the very basis of our modern harmonic engineering. We no longer use brute force to change materials. We simply play the correct frequency and watch the ether rearrange the atoms for us. The transition from a world of scarcity to a world of abundance began with the rediscovery of these hidden notes. For centuries, the academic world had mocked Newton's alchemy, calling it a stain on his scientific legacy. They did not realize that his alchemy was actually the highest form of physics. He was working with the fundamental building blocks of the universe, while the scientists of your era were merely scratching the surface. He understood that the mercurial spirit he described was actually the liquid state of etheric energy, a substance that can take any form and power any machine. When our first etheric resonator was turned on, it produced more energy in a second than all the coal burned in the history of the world, and it was clean, silent, and infinite. Newton was also deeply concerned with the concept of time. In your era, you viewed time as a linear arrow, moving relentlessly forward. Newton saw it as another dimension of the etheric ocean. He believed that the density of the ether determined the flow of time itself. Near massive objects, where the ether is compressed, time slows down. In the vast voids between the stars, time moves with a terrifying speed. By creating localized etheric bubbles, we can now travel vast distances without aging a single day. This was the secret Newton hinted at in his chronological studies of the ancient world. He wasn't just interested in history, he was interested in the mechanics of how the universe records events in the etheric fabric. The religious authorities of his day would have burned him at the stake if they had known the full extent of his discoveries. He believed that the divine was not some distant figure in the clouds, but the very energy that pulsed through the ether. He called it the divine sensorium. To Newton, studying science was the highest form of worship, for it was the study of the mind of the Creator expressed through the laws of the universe. He was a man out of time, a prophet of a future that he knew would take centuries to arrive. He left his work in pieces, like a puzzle for a future generation to solve. He knew that one day, an analyst like me would look back and recognize the path he had cleared through the jungle of human ignorance. In the year 2100, we no longer fear the dark. We have realized that the darkness between the stars is not empty, but filled with the light of the ether, that your eyes were simply not evolved to see. We have built sensors that can detect the subtle vibrations of the vacuum, turning the night sky into a vibrant, glowing map of energy. Every star is a whirlpool in the etheric ocean, and every planet is a smaller eddy. We navigate these currents with a grace that would have seemed like magic to you. We are no longer prisoners of our solar system. We are citizens of the galaxy. All because one man had the courage to look into the abyss and see not a void, but a beginning. Then came Einstein. He made the speed of light absolute and warped space-time. These were mathematically perfect equations. But even Einstein, in his later years, confessed that space without ether is unthinkable. For in such space, there would be no propagation of light, no possibility of existence for standards of space and time. But it was too late. The religion of science had been established, and the word ether excommunicated from scientific dictionaries. In 2100, we have merged the visions of Einstein and Newton. General relativity is a density flow within the ether ocean. We don't warp space-time like a blank sheet of paper. We manipulate reality by changing the local resistance of the ether. What Einstein called the field was the same reality as Newton's ether, just renamed with the timid language of the 20th century. My systems now focus on the greatest embarrassment of 21st century physics, the vacuum catastrophe, when your scientists calculated the energy in what they thought was empty space. The number was 10 to the 120th power greater than observed. They dismissed this as the largest prediction error in history. But it was not an error. The mathematics was not lying. You simply did not have a device to harness or even measure that energy. Newton felt this energy and called it the subtle spirit. Today, in 2100, we power our entire civilization with infinite energy. It comes from that very void you misunderstood. We no longer need power plants, batteries, or cables. Every cubic centimeter of space is filled with enough energy to power an entire city for centuries. Newton knew this 300 years ago, but he did not give the key to the world of that day. He knew that to manage the ocean, you first had to stop playing with pebbles on the shore. Those strange spiral drawings in Newton's alchemical notes were actually the first blueprints for the etheric turbines we use today. The speed of light is 300,000 kilometers per second. Your ancestors thought this was a universal speed limit. But the speed of sound was once a limit to a sound wave travels at the speed the air medium allows. If you change the medium, the speed changes. Newton predicted that the density of the ether could vary. Today, in 2100, we make the speed of light irrelevant by decreasing the ether density in front of our ships and increasing it behind them. We are not traveling faster, we are narrowing the ocean in front of us. We found the first traces of these etheric waveguides in Newton's geometric drawings. 21st century physicists thought mass was a fixed obstacle, but mass is just turbulence in the ether ocean. Today, we have tamed that turbulence and reduced interstellar distances to mere minutes. In our era, we understand that light is not a particle moving through a vacuum, but a vibration of the ether itself. By modulating the frequency of this vibration, we can communicate across solar systems without the delays that plagued your early space missions. Newton understood that the properties of light were determined by the density of the medium it traversed. He spent years in his dark room, splitting light with prisms, not just to understand color, but to see the underlying structure of the ether. He realized that the ether was more dense near massive objects and more thin in deep space. This density gradient is what creates the illusion of gravity. It is not that masses pull each other, it is that the ether pushes them together to find equilibrium. This single realization is the foundation of our entire transportation network in 2100. Newton's studies of light were far more than just physics experiments. He was looking for the language of the universe. He believed that every vibration in the ether carried information. In our time, we have developed technology that can read historical vibrations. Stored in the etheric fabric of a planet, it is like a cosmic record player that can replay the events of the past. We have used this to verify Newton's deepest insights. We can see him now in the late 17th century, standing over a bubbling crucible, speaking to the ether as if it were a conscious entity. He wasn't crazy. He was the only one in the room who understood that he was surrounded by an ocean of intelligence. He knew that the gold he was trying to create was not a metal, but a state of being. A harmony between the human mind and the universal ether. One of the most profound things we have discovered from Newton's private letters is his description of the vegetative spirit of the planets. He believed that the Earth was a giant living organism that absorbed ether from space to nourish its core. He compared volcanoes to the breathing of a great beast and the tides to its pulse. In 2100, our geological monitoring systems have confirmed that the core of the Earth is indeed maintained by a constant influx of vacuum energy. If this flow were ever interrupted, the planet would lose its magnetic field and its warmth within decades. Newton understood the fragility of this balance and warned that humanity must live in harmony with these etheric cycles. Your era ignored these warnings, treating the Earth like a dead rock to be mined and exploited. Our era has returned to the Newtonian view of a living, breathing planet. The technology we use to travel between the stars is based on a concept Newton called the etheric vortex. By rotating magnetic fields at specific harmonic frequencies, we can create a localized whirlpool in the ether that pulls our ships forward at speeds that would have been unthinkable in your time. This is not the brute force of a rocket engine. It is the elegance of a sailboat riding the wind. Newton's notebooks are filled with drawings of these vortices, though he labeled them with alchemical symbols to hide their true purpose. He knew that the secret to the stars was not in more powerful explosives, but in understanding the fluid dynamics of space itself. He was the first human to realize that the vacuum of space is more liquid than gas, and that we must learn to swim before we can fly. The silence that Newton maintained throughout his life was his greatest sacrifice. He knew that the world was not ready for the power he had discovered. He saw the religious wars and the greed of the monarchies and realized that giving them the secret of infinite energy would only lead to a more efficient form of destruction. He chose to hide his work in a maze of symbols and riddles, hoping that by the time humanity was smart enough to solve them, they would also be wise enough to use them for peace. We are that generation. We have solved the riddles, and we have built the paradise that Newton envisioned. We have eliminated hunger and cold. We have cured diseases by realigning the etheric resonance of the human body. And we have reached out to the stars to find our place among the other civilizations that have also mastered the ether. As a system analyst, my job is to ensure that the data flow between our colonies remains stable. This stability is maintained by a network of etheric relays that span the solar system. Each relay is tuned to a frequency that Newton identified in his studies of the harmony of the spheres. While your astronomers thought this was just a coincidence, we have found that these intervals are necessary to maintain the gravitational stability of the system. The solar system is a giant instrument, and we are just now learning how to play along with its song. Newton was the first composer of this cosmic music, and his score is still guiding us today. When we look back at the 21st century, we see a world on the brink of collapse, fueled by a desperate search for energy that was already everywhere. You were like people living in a house made of solid gold, starving because you couldn't find a copper coin on the floor. Newton tried to show you the walls, but you were too busy looking at the dirt. His legacy is not just the laws of motion or the theory of gravity, it is the key to the cage that you have built for yourselves. Our era is the proof that the cage has been opened. We have embraced the ocean, and in doing so, we have found our true potential. And then there is dark matter, the mysterious ghost that makes up 85% of the universe. Throughout the 21st century, you could not see it or touch it, only measure its gravitational effect. You built massive underground labs and searched for exotic particles. You found nothing, because dark matter was not a thing. It was the mass of the ether ocean itself. Newton meant exactly this when he said the universe was filled with an invisible, subtle substance. Stars, planets, and we are just small bubbles on this massive ocean. You measured the bubbles and ignored the sea. Today, in 2100, we do not search for dark matter. We slide silently across the galaxies using its currents. The invisible glue holding galaxies together is our main highway today, carrying our ships beyond the speed of light. Newton's invisible ocean is the safest freeway on our maps. What you call dark is our brightest energy source. The true genius of Newton was his ability to see beyond the physical and into the mathematical structure of the unseen. He knew that the geometry of the universe was not fixed, but fluid. He wrote about the vegetative spirit of the Earth, suggesting that the planet itself was a living system breathing the ether. This was not a poetic metaphor. It was a biological fact that we have finally confirmed. The Earth absorbs ether to maintain its core temperature and its magnetic field. Without this constant influx of energy from the etheric ocean, the Earth would have frozen and died billions of years ago. Newton's simian chemistry experiments were an attempt to replicate this planetary metabolism on a small scale. He wanted to create a device that could breathe the ether and produce heat and light forever. He was so close, but 17th century technology could not create the precise magnetic fields required. In 2100, we look back at your struggles with energy scarcity with a sense of profound sadness. You fought wars over oil and gas. When the very air around you was saturated with enough energy, you built giant dams and wind turbines, trying to catch the crumbs of the sun's energy, while ignoring the infinite feast of the vacuum energy. Newton tried to warn you in his letters, but his words were shrouded in alchemical secrecy to protect the knowledge from those who would use it for evil. He spoke of the mercurial spirit and the dragon's blood, terms that sound like fairy tales to your ears. But to us, they are the chemical symbols for etheric catalysts. He was the guardian of a fire that could either warm the world or burn it to a cinder. The transition from your era to ours was not easy. It required a complete dismantling of the scientific establishment that had denied the ether for over a century. It required the rediscovery of Newton's true work, hidden in the private collections of the world's elite. Suddenly, the speed of light was a variable, not a constant. Suddenly, mass was a property of interaction. Suddenly, the entire universe was open to us. We owe our stars to the man who hid his light for 300 years. Every day, our interstellar gates open to receive ships returning from the farthest reaches of the galaxy. These gates operate on the principle of harmonic resonance that Newton described in his secret commentaries. He believed that certain proportions and geometries could create a bridge between different points in the etheric medium. We have found that he was correct. By constructing our gates according to these sacred ratios, we can fold distance. This is the ultimate expression of Newton's bridge, a technology that allows us to walk across the galaxy as easily as he walked through the gardens of Cambridge. But the most significant discovery is not about energy or travel, but about the nature of life itself. We have found that the ether is the carrier of biological information. It is the field that guides the growth of a seed into a tree and the development of an embryo into a human. Newton's interest in the vegetative spirit was actually a protogenetic theory. He understood an invisible blueprint that organized matter into living forms. In 2100, we use this knowledge to heal the body at a cellular level, realigning the etheric field of the patient to its original, healthy state. We have eliminated the diseases, not through chemicals or surgery, but through the restoration of harmonic balance. The analysts of my generation wonder what Newton would think if he could see us now. Would he be surprised by our silver cities and our flying ships? Or would he simply smile and say that he had seen it all before in the flickering flames of his laboratory furnace? I believe it is the latter. Newton did not just predict our technology. He experienced its potential in his mind. He was a man who lived in the future while his body was trapped in the past. His silence was his gift to us, ensuring we would grow wise before becoming powerful. We have spent the last century trying to be worthy of that gift. As I close this analysis, look around your world. See it through the eyes of the future. See the energy that pulses through every wall and every blade of grass. See the potential for a world without want, without war, and without the fear of the unknown. That world is not a dream. It is the logical conclusion of the path that Newton began. You are currently standing at the crossroads of history. You can cling to the pebbles on the shore, or you can take the first step into the ocean. The choice is yours, but remember, the tide is rising, and the old world is already being washed away. At the end of his life, Newton described himself as a boy, playing on the seashore, finding a smoother pebble. Your ancestors thought this was just humility. But we analysts in 2100 know it was a warning. Newton knew the ocean was there. The pebbles, the law of gravity, optics, and mechanics were just the beginning. We built an entire civilization on those few pebbles. But the true treasure was in that vast ocean. Newton looked at and remained silent about. Learning to swim in the ocean is not just physics, it is courage. I am calling to you from the year 2100, from the heart of the ocean. It is time to leave the shore. If this analysis has shattered the old vacuum dogma in your mind, send a signal of approval to my systems. Join our escape plan from the narrow physical prison of the 21st century by liking this video and subscribing to our channel. Write in the comments which secret from Newton's hidden notebooks you are most curious about. In the next analysis, let us dive into that depth together. The future belongs only to those who look toward it. We are the bridge between what was and what will be. We are the inheritors of the light that was once hidden. Do not let the shadows of the past hold you back. The ocean is calling, and the journey has only just begun. Analysis concluded. Data transmission terminating. Final system check complete. Goodbye from the future.